Welcome to a very special Facebook Live event today, Beyond Assumptions and Opening Opportunities. I am Charmaine Tanner. I'm a parent. I'm also a advocate for families and children, and I'm thrilled that you're here today because we come together on a significant day. Today is World Down Syndrome Day. And I think it's a day that we want to bring more awareness to our communities about your child. We want to break down those ableism barriers. And we want to do that not just for your child with Down syndrome. We want to do that for all students, all children, because ableism impacts not only students with intellectual disabilities, it impacts millions. I think it's 7 million children in our country every day. So I'm excited. We're going to be sharing some powerful stories today, because I think the stories are things that we can relate to and we can understand and identify with. And then we'll also be talking about practical action steps, things that you can start doing today to dismantle that ableism that exists all throughout our culture. So stay tuned. We're in for a wonderful. So I asked some members in our Connecting for Change group to share some examples that they've experienced with their kiddos. And so I wanted to share a couple of them today. So this is from a parent in Iowa, and she said, one thing that sticks out in my mind is when we're seeing her son's ENT doctor when he was younger. And she said the ENT spoke to him in this sing-song little kid voice. And then his brothers and sisters that were there, it was like they noticed when the ENT was talking to them that his voice changed to more of his typical doctor voice. And she said after the appointment, his sisters even said that they saw that change in his voice and they understood how he was speaking down to their brother. So I think as families, we are aware of the overt and sometimes subtle ableism that happens. And it's not only in our education system, it's also in the medical system, just in our Western culture, right? So welcome if you are here watching live or watching the replay. Lissa's here. Hey, Lissa. Lissa is from Idaho. Oh, Barb. Oh, good. Barbara's from Iowa, not Iowa, Ohio. Sorry. And Catherine, let us know where you're watching from. So say hi, make comments. We want this to be, oh, she's from Georgia. Oh, great. Thanks. We want this to be as interactive as possible when we do live shows. So by asking questions, putting in your comments and your thoughts, any aha moments that you get, that will help this be more interactive. So I wanted to share a couple more examples of ableism. And while I'm doing this, you can type in the comments examples that your child, that your family has experienced around people having low expectations for your child, people thinking your child needs to be fixed. So give us some examples of that. And I will share another one from our group. And this, let's see. Okay, this is from a parent in New Jersey who's in our Connecting for Change group. And she said, well, one of the big examples is when they recommended a life skills program for her daughter. And then get this, she said at a person-centered planning meeting, everyone provided a very simple version of what she could do in the future. They said they think that her daughter would be good at having a greeter sort of a job. And then this is the clincher. The facilitator of the person-centered planning meeting, who came from a very reputable university, even told me to discourage her daughter from planning on attending college because she might never be able to attend college. So those stories, those things that we hear from other people, they impact our lives as family members. And think of the impact it makes on your child's life. When, as a young student, people are already predicting, well, they probably won't go to college. So, oh, here it is. Be more realistic. Have you heard that in IEP meetings before? Oh, parents, we appreciate your comments. You just need to be a little more realistic for your child's future. Those are the overt ableism that we want to definitely break down, stomp out, clear away, because those become those self-fulfilling prophecies. And it's like we've done this enough to generations of people with disabilities, and we need to stop. Hey, Kim's here from Iowa. Abby's here from Kentucky. I love it. And I think what it shows is, right, this isn't isolated to the state that you live in. There are parents in every state, in every territory of our country that are experiencing ableism. Okay, so Catherine, thanks for commenting. So Catherine says, life skills have been recommended by school team. We teach her life skills every day. She picks out items when we go shopping from the list. She uses our credit cards to pay since she is only 12 years old. But yeah, exactly, Catherine. And I love that. And that was always a value that drove us when advocating for our son Dylan, who has Down syndrome and is now an adult. But looking back, it was like, he doesn't need to go on a field trip to the grocery store. We go to the grocery store and Dylan goes with us. He doesn't need a field trip to the restaurant. We go to restaurants. He learns how to look at the menu, and if he can't read the words, he asks, he looks at photos. Those are things that we do as a family. And our value was, when he's in school, we want him doing what other students are doing, learning academic skills, taking elective classes. So yeah, that's really important. Hey, Tamara, and Tamara's from Massachusetts. So we got the Northeast here with us too. So yeah, continue adding more examples in here. I did want to share the video that probably you have seen. Maybe let us know in the comments. Say yes or no if you've seen the public service announcement that, what's it? It's like, oh shoot, I can. I don't know. It's something about assumptions and the person being able to actually do it. I'm sorry for that introduction. So we're going to watch this 1 minute PSA and talk about it a little. And I want to see what your reactions are to it. So let me share my screen. And
Hey bartender, you assume that I cannot drink a margarita, so you don't serve me a margarita? So I don't drink a margarita. Your assumption becomes reality. And parents, you assume that I cannot live on my own, so you don't encourage me to live on my own, so I don't live on my own. Coach, you assume that I cannot hit harder, so you don't train me to hit harder, so I don't hit harder. And teacher, you assume that I cannot learn Shakespeare, so you don't teach me Shakespeare. Old MacDonald had a farm, so I don't learn Shakespeare. E-I-E-I-O. But hey, if all your assumptions become reality, then assume that I can drink a margarita. So you serve me a margarita, so I drink a margarita. Assume that I can live on my own, so I live on my own. Assume that I can hit harder, so I hit harder. Assume that I can learn Shakespeare. So, what fools these mortals be to learn fucking Shakespeare? You assume I can't swear, right? Assume that I can do my job, that I can go to parties, that I can have sex, that I can be on stage. Assume that I can, so maybe I will.
Yes, assume I can. And I would love for you to put an emoji in the comments. Like, what is your reaction when you see that PSA? Because there are a range of reactions that I've seen online. So just use an emoji in the comments and let us know what you thought of that. Here's Tamra. All right. She is clapping, standing on her feet. Yes, yes. Yeah. And Abby says, I love it. Assumptions can become reality because you aren't even given the opportunity. Unfortunately, individuals with disabilities aren't given opportunities due to people's assumptions. Exactly, exactly. And it's like, it's past time, right? That we look at things differently. I was I guess naive when I first saw this PSA, and I was like, yes, yes, and I was sharing it everywhere. And then to find out that there are people that see this in a different light, and were offended by the profanity and the, I guess, abruptness of the actors. And so I have to recognize that some people will perceive this video in different ways. And sometimes I forget that not everybody thinks like me. So I love it, Kim. Thank you for your emojis. And one of the things with the video that really struck me with me was when she was talking about how she could effing learn Shakespeare. And it brought back memories of my son Dylan when he was in 8th grade. Well, to begin with, he was always fully included. Um, and, and part of that was because we filed for due process when he was 3 about least restrictive environment. So, however, when he was in middle school in 8th grade, the teacher was talking about how they would be learning about Shakespeare. And, so one of the things that kind of came up at the IEP meeting was like, how much will he get out of this? Is it important for him to learn Shakespeare? Should he be in the special ed room instead doing something else? And we stuck to our values that no, he's going to be in with the other 8th graders. So he had a terrific 8th grade year. His 8th grade English teacher was this wonderful, accepting, creative teacher. And Dylan loved being able to say things like, to be or not to be, that is the question. And it was just like this moment of pride that you could see just bubbling up out of him, and people being like, wow, you know. And then I remember when it was ninth grade, freshman orientation. And so the parents and the students were traveling through the student schedule, you know. And so we got to his English class. And so this is ninth grade English. And the teacher said, oh, you know, we're going to be learning about Shakespeare this year. And Dylan was like, to be or not to be, that is the question. And the ninth grade teacher was like, yes, Dylan, yes, you know, you must have studied Hamlet before. And it was like, yes, he studied Hamlet when he was in eighth grade English class. And he wasn't in the special ed room counting plastic coins or folding towels for the cafeteria. Dylan did learn about Hamlet, Shakespeare, when he was in eighth grade. And he also got to participate in ninth grade English when they had the unit on Shakespeare. And then fast forward to his transition years after high school, was going to the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs. So his freshman year as a college student, one of his classes was Intro to Theater. And guess what? One of the assignments that he had for the class was to go see the student production of Hamlet at the university and write a review. So it was like we came full circle from the belief in eighth grade that, yes, he could learn this, to ninth grade, to being a freshman in college and taking a college class. And so I went with Dylan when it was about, I don't know, 3 weeks later when the production was happening. And I went with Dylan and one evening and sitting in that small college theater and just looking at Dylan's face beaming while he was watching the students perform Hamlet. And when it came to that time, when the actor on the stage was saying, to be or not to be, that is the question. Guess who in the audience was whispering that along with the actor? So, yes, your kids can learn effing Shakespeare. They can learn many things, and the general ed curriculum is where that rich learning happens. So, thank you, thank you. Let's go on to some more stories because I love Barbara's here. She comes from the same era of inclusion for me. Yeah, and she said, how easy is Shakespeare for any student? Yeah, and I think that's the thing, you know, and it's like the science class. It's like, you know, not everybody has this deep understanding of the concepts, but our kids can have some prior knowledge that they can connect to. And it's not going to be, you know, this formal discussion of Shakespeare. However, when he sees a picture of Shakespeare, when he hears something on TV about it, he goes back to eighth grade, ninth grade, freshman year in college, and he's got all of this prior knowledge to tap into. And unfortunately, not all teachers understand the wealth of prior knowledge that your child has. And so that's why it's up to us as parents to help teachers know, you know, my kid does go to the grocery store, reads the list, uses the debit card to pay for it. My kid does know how to stand in line at the amusement park. My child has such an interest in ancient history that for sure he is going to shine in that area. So when we're, writing those about me profiles for our kids, I think we need to even go a little bit deeper than what's working, what's not working, what they love. We need to be able to share with teachers what your child's experiences are. So, one tip I have is throughout the year to be able to talk to teachers and say, what's the next science unit coming up? What are they going to study next in social studies? What does chemistry look like? And see what kinds of experiences your child has had that deal with that topic they're going to be studying, and let the teacher know your child already knows something and they can learn more about that subject too. So Kim, she says prior knowledge is a very key phrase, one I have not used in an IEP, but I think would be great. Yes, POV. Yes, I know. And yeah, because it's like they have this prior knowledge, and guess what? They can get new knowledge too. And Barbara says, yes, how sad we're going backwards from the opportunities more kids seem to have in the past. Yeah. And, Dylan is 35 now. So, it was like the early 90s, 1990s, when he started school. And that's about the time Barbara's daughter started school. And for some reason, there was kind of this wave of inclusion, the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s. Um, and it's not like we still didn't have to advocate. Like I said, we filed for due process over LRE. However, the rich, inclusive schooling that Dylan got is not what I see most kids getting today. So it's like so strange to think, like, how did we have this moment and years of triumph and then come back down to this deep valley? Um, it's not, yeah, it's something that still needs to be worked on. So I want to share some other stories from our Connecting for Change group, because I think it just shows the universal problems that we have with ableism in our country, right? So this is from a parent in California, and she said that her son was having difficulty comprehending and annotating the grade level text of a well-known Tier 1 curriculum. And she said the teachers just assumed he wasn't capable. And the parent, she kept telling them the issue wasn't the subject matter, or I'm sorry, the issue was the subject matter, because he had no interest in reading these stories about animals and fables about animals, because they were very abstract for him and like not at all what he wanted to be doing. So what happened is, she said she kept telling them to leverage his interests through interesting books about high-speed excuse me, magnetic levitation. I don't even know what that is. Trains, Donald Cruise fiction books about trains, and his background knowledge on trains, electricity, and other topics, and to use that to bridge to other topics. And she said instead, what the teachers chose to do was they did one-on-one instruction on a software that turned the third and fourth grade animal fable texts into kindergarten level animal fables. She said, I just about cried when I saw what they were doing. She said, luckily they realized it wasn't good for him, and now they're trying higher interest books at his reading level and closer to his grade level. So that's where, your communication and conversations and developing a relationship with your kids' teachers comes in so handy, because if they don't know what, really motivates your child, they can't connect that in the classroom. However, the other caution, as soon as I said that, the caution is just because you tell teachers about your child's interests, what they like, different background information, doesn't mean the teacher will connect that information to, aha, when I'm, picking reading selections, I'll keep this in mind. So not only as parents do we have to give that basic information, those and not so basic, those nuances that we know about our child. We need to share that with everyone that works with our kid. We also need to say, so because he's like, uh, excelling at karate, how can we use that at school? And then you allow the teacher to have some think time. And if they're not coming up with ideas, you talk about, well, what about in PE class one time if he could kind of be the spotlight and show some kids some simple moves that he's known or that he's learned, and that helps your child be in this leadership role. So yes, we want them to know about your child's prior notice. Too many IEP meetings, prior knowledge, and their interests. However, we probably are going to have to connect those dots for a lot of teachers. So just be aware of that too. And Virginia, how are you? How are you? I haven't talked with you so long. She says, low expectations when my child can't show what he knows at school. Lack of skills without teaching them because they believe there's nothing more to be done. Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like they keep using the same Edmark sight word reading program and don't have an expectation that our kids can learn phonics and decoding words. So yeah, it's just, I don't know, it's like so frustrating. And the ableism it just seems so embedded in our society, and the low expectations, the looking of how can we fix this kid, that medical model, all of that needs to be dismantled and never brought to another generation of people. So we're going to be talking about some ways, and they're just like small practical ways, but when we all do it in every state around the country, then we have this impact, right? And so let's go over here. And yeah, exactly. Virginia says he's not given opportunities because they think he can't. Yeah, it's like unfathomable to them. Like, what? Have a kid with an intellectual disability learn how to drive a car? No, I don't think so. Guess what? There are kids with Down syndrome that have taken driver's ed and drive cars safely. And Tamara says, it doesn't work for the general ed teachers in our district. The more parents, oh, shoot, look at this. The more parents advocate for their children with IEPs, the more teachers consider them a nuisance and limit the dialogue considerably. Isn't that interesting, that kind of resistance? So Tamara, she's in our Connecting for Change group. Let's talk about that at our next meetup, because yeah, and see, what I think what happens is, districts play the odds, and the odds are parents are going to get tired, parents are going to get burned out, and parents are going to give up. And so when they have a parent that's more vocal and assertive about what their child needs, um, the pushback that you get can be considerable, right? I mean, I would bet everyone on the line and watching the replay, you've had that kind of pushback once or twice, or maybe every year. So, and so Tamara, like I said, every situation is different. So let's talk about that in our group. Because we can't let that be the accepted way for that district to operate. So we can have kind of brainstorm some ideas. And the rest of you here, do you have ideas when you speak up, you get pushback, and then it's almost like you start feeling that retaliation too? So Barbara says, with a good inclusion facilitator, I found that general ed teachers were empowered. That's great. And that's what you want to see, right? Is support for the teachers. And, as much as, we're disappointed with our broken education system, just like our kids have some lagging skills and need to learn those skills, teachers haven't been taught in college to have high expectations. And so we have to look at the skill level of the staff and not make that a punishment, like, oh, you need to take some classes, lady. No, it's like, I understand when my son was born, I needed some support. I had no idea what to do with a little baby with Down syndrome with lots of health conditions, right? So as a teacher, we want to make sure that they feel supported too. And more districts. So let me know if in your district, do you have inclusion facilitators? They're called kind of different titles, but do you have someone like that? I'm finding more districts are hiring people like that. And I've heard of situations with, inclusion facilitators on the West Coast and on the East Coast. I'm not sure if I've heard that many examples from the Midwest or anything, but let us know in the comments. Does your district or districts in your state, have you heard of them hiring inclusion facilitators? One of the things like happens so much is they get spread so thin. If you have one inclusion facilitator for your whole district, and even if your district isn't huge, I mean, that's a lot for that person to do. However, there are so many positive stories I've heard from parents of really good inclusion facilitators making such a huge difference. So yeah, that would be great. So let me go over here to some things that we can look at right away. So I mentioned earlier that there's like overt ableism and there's more subtle ableism. So overt ableism is, what we see every day, segregation when we have special ed classrooms, when kids are exempt from field trips unless their parent can come. I think you can probably fill in the comments a lot of examples of overt ableism. So I was going to go to another example here. So this is a mom in Texas who is in our Connecting for Change group. And she says low expectations daily between special ed classes not being rigorous enough and general ed classes being modified too much, though we keep saying she can do more. When benchmark testing happens, so much emphasis is put on the single source of data that it limits teachers' thinking of what she's capable of learning. It feels like the IQ test is what labels our kids. No one is presuming competence. So, yeah. And we can have big discussions on why IQ tests aren't appropriate and don't really help help the staff understand and know your child. So, as an advocate, I recommend that if parents aren't feeling comfortable having an IQ test on their child done, you don't give consent for the IQ test. Um, so, however, that's a whole nother show, right? Okay, more subtle ableism. This, I think of this as kind of when um, people have good intentions. However, it's like they don't understand. So, for in the education setting, it's the teacher writing a lesson plan and really not taking into account the variability that she has in her classroom with the students. So that is a subtle ableism example. And then the other thing is, people like wanting to push someone in their wheelchair without even asking if they need help. um, what are some subtle examples of ableism that you can think of, or maybe that your child has experienced? So, what can we do? What can we do? What can we do? Because we're not just going to talk about horrible examples of ableism. Now we're switching. So, ready to switch with us? Now we're switching to what you and I can do every day. Every day. So, the first one is say the word. Say the A word. And what's the A word? Not that one. The A word is ableism. So call it out when you see it. People need to recognize and be aware of what they are doing is an example of ableism. And if we don't use the A word, people aren't going to understand that there's something that they need to change. So the first thing you can do is say the word. The next one is model for other people and take out these phrases that we've grown up learning, like, oh, that drives me crazy. I used to say that a lot, and now I have to catch myself sometimes to remember, no, that's inappropriate. Or the blind leading the blind. No. So all of those kind of nuanced phrases, we want to take that out of our vocabulary and also model that so others will understand that too. And depending on the situation, you can, be assertive and say, if somebody says, oh, that drives me crazy, say, actually, what I've learned is we're not using that term crazy. And instead, we're expanding our vocabulary and using other words. So that's something that you can do. Another thing, if you are on social media and making posts, is something that I've tried doing the past couple of years, is always writing an image description of what your Facebook, Instagram post is. Many people that use screen readers without some kind of text, they aren't able to see with real clarity what that picture on your meme is. So as you start using image descriptions on your social media posts, people will see that, they'll notice it, people will thank you. And also that's another way for other people to see, oh, that's a great idea. I think I'll start doing that too. So another thing we can do is ask before you help someone, because what you consider helping can be taken completely different, a different perspective from the person you're supposedly helping. And that is something too that we can model, right? that we don't just assume because somebody's in a wheelchair that they need an extra person to push them. So those are kinds of things that we can ask before assuming that somebody needs help. And then the other thing that is like, so call out when you see people framing disability as either a tragedy or inspirational. When people say things like, oh, he suffers from cerebral palsy, it's this tragedy. Or when you make the announcement that you have this wonderful, bubbly, bright baby boy who has Down syndrome. And it's like, oh, I'm sorry. And it's like people see disability as a tragedy. Or on the opposite end, it becomes this inspirational porn. And I'll be sending out a newsletter next week with like a summary of what we talked about today, but also some resources. And you never know where you're going to find good resources. Like I found this excellent resource on the Oregon Department of Ed website about ableism. And it was so great to see that teachers are talking about it. There's resources from the National Education Association, the union for many teachers across the country. I was an NEA member. And they have resources for teachers specifically around ableism. So I want to share some resources that are out there that, sometimes if you share something with a teacher from a teacher organization, they're more readily to say, oh, this came from NEA. Oh, okay, well, maybe I'll read it. So I'll be sharing those. If you don't, if you're not on my email list, you can go to iep.today/weekly-adv-tips. And like I said, next week, probably Tuesday, my newsletter will be coming out and you can read what we did today, but also some other resources. Okay, so let's look at some other action steps that you can do. This is, and Barbara, if you're still here, I know you know about this. Nothing about us without us. And I actually have a t-shirt from Nth Degree, Dan Wilkins. And the whole concept here is that we have to be inviting people with disabilities, disabled students, marginalized students to the table when we're talking about 504 plans or IEP, renewing this, writing a new IEP for your child. Your child needs to be at the table. And I know different people have different feelings, and it's like, at least have your child there for part of the meeting. I would really encourage you to try doing that. Dylan always attended his IEP meetings from age 3 up. There were a few meetings when we were dealing with due process. We didn't have Dylan come to those. And different parents do different things. Your child can be there to say hi, to say what he likes about school or doesn't like about school, to say who his friends are at school, what he loves to do with his friends at recess. It can be a real informal kind of thing. Some parents do, have their child make a PowerPoint or a video showing their child. And again, it's like, this is the person we are talking about when we have these meetings. And then it's not just having their voice at the IEP table. Students make powerful, impactful speeches at school board meetings. So think about having your child, sign up for the public time to talk and he or she can talk for 2 or 3 minutes and talk about the things that are the most positive at school, things that are working, and then also share examples of the ableism. We have to call it out, and we have to teach our kids what is ableism. And we have to be models for that advocacy, because your child needs to be able to be speaking up more each year that they are in school. So nothing about us without us. Um, and and that goes for adults. I mean, my son gets adult support services, and we were talking about how things were going the other day. And I know, because I've been to enough of these meetings, that they hardly ever ask the person how things are going. So I always like kind of interrupt right away and say, "Oh, Dylan, I would love for you to talk about how things are going and what's, what you like." And he gets his voice in the room first before the professionals start talking about, whatever the goals that they have for him. And so, yeah, your child has to be included, and they have to be part of discussions, and they have to have choices about their lives. So, yes, as parents of young kids, we kind of take that microphone and we're the voice. But guess what? We can't always be the voice. We have to pass that microphone to our child. So as they're young, start doing this. Nothing about us without us. And I wanted to, well, there was a quote that I had read when I was looking at the NEA resources. And this is from a retired special ed teacher in Ohio. And she said, ableism is built into the structure of society. And yeah, for sure, right? I mean, and unless we start doing some specific small steps, unless we start using our voice at SEAC meetings or your developmental disability council meetings or your state SEAC meetings. Ableism is a topic that needs to be brought up, because we have way too many examples every day. Your child experiences way too many examples of ableism every day. So we have to work together. We have to change the conversations. We have to challenge the beliefs that our kids have to be fixed. And we need to do this by widening our circle of allies and working together. So I thank you so much for being here. And I'm going to come back to comments. This is interesting. Charlotte says, people call my daughter who's blind inspirational because she crosses the street to school independently. Yeah, those low expectations, right? It's like, what? A blind person couldn't do that. Your daughter is wonderful. And Barbara says, in high school, her daughter Erin came to every meeting, which we usually did in October to include current teachers, had a transition meeting in the spring with the previous teachers giving suggestions. Erin would share her vision, interests at the beginning of each IEP meeting, followed by her parents' vision and comments. So that's excellent, Barbara. Yeah. And that's the thing that makes a difference, right? And I know earlier I gave the example from a parent in New Jersey saying even the facilitator of the person-centered planning meeting talked about, no, your daughter probably won't go to college. And one of the things that I learned was in 5th grade, we had a person-centered planning session with Dylan in 5th grade before he was going to, make the transition to middle school. And one of the rules that I had as a facilitator, because I also am a trained person-centered planning facilitator, is there needs to be more students than adults. Because if we have all adults sitting around the table at a person-centered planning meeting and your child is the only voice from students, that's going to be like another IEP meeting. So anyway, in 5th grade, we had a map session for Dylan, and he invited classmates and the present teachers, and then a couple of middle school teachers and the principal and the counselor also came, but they were observers at the back of the room, so they didn't, participate in the discussion, but I wanted them just to hear about Dylan. So anyway, and his classmates, his friends were so great at this 5th grade meeting. And so then I thought, you know what? We need to do this at IEP meetings. Have students, friends of your child come to an IEP meeting. And we really didn't start doing that until high school. And I kind of regret that we missed those middle school years of being able to do that. However, in high school, he would invite, like 2 or 3 friends. They would get, if it's during the school day, they would get permission from their parents to, miss class and be at the meeting. And hearing what other kids say about your child and like, oh, this worked, it's like when we do this, it really helps. Or the other thing that I love with kids is to give them permission to tell your kid to stop it. Because like so many people are like, oh, we're kind of afraid. We don't want him to get upset. And it's like, no, if Dylan's doing something that's bugging you, tell him to stop it. And so kids come up with these situations and it's like perfect. The other thing that kids come up with is, they notice that when Dylan was working with a small group, that he really talked more, participated more than when it was the whole class. So little things like that you can find out from classmates. So I really encourage you to have your kid go to meetings. And so let's see. Jeannie says, my son will question what he doesn't understand and says he likes or dislikes. Also, we as parents had to learn not to interrupt or save the moment to let the interaction between school and our son play out. We are so proud of him. Yes, yes, yes. And then the pride that your child has with like, I can say something, adults will listen to me. This is a safe place where I can talk. Yeah, it makes it so much better, right? Yeah, and Tamara says the barriers are in the design of the environment, not in the student. Children do well if they can. Yes, yes, Ross Green, right? And that's the thing. So I don't know. I feel like there are so many like offshoots of today's live. So thank you so much for helping us with the conversation. And when I think about the environment needs to change, not the child. And I love that point, Tamara. And what I really try to have educators understand is when something isn't working well, what can I change as the adult in the classroom to help support this child in another way? So instead of immediately saying, oh, your child's avoiding or escaping work or whatever, I'm like, no, what can I change? What do I need to figure out as a teacher? Is the work we're giving him too easy? How many times have your kids been asked to name the colors, the shapes, to identify numbers, letters? It's like, move on, move on. So maybe it's too easy and maybe it's too boring. Maybe the work's too hard. Maybe the child didn't totally understand the directions. There are so many underlying reasons why your child might not want to do some work. Instead of writing a whole behavior plan around getting your child to do their work, how about if we look at the adult in the room? What can the adult do differently? And then the other component is what Tamara was saying, the environment. What can we change in the environment? And I was guilty of this too. I was a special ed teacher and a classroom teacher. And when I was a classroom teacher, it was like, oh, bulletin boards. I love it. We can do all this stuff in our room. And guess what? For some kids, all that stuff in your room isn't helping them. That's something in the environment that the adult can change. So thanks for bringing that up. Yes. Abby says, boring, as my daughter says. Yes. Dylan even had a sign that he did for boring. I won't show you right now. So as we wind up this time, I want to thank you for seriously looking at how we can dismantle ableism. It can be overt, it can be subtle, but it's still ableism. Call out ableism. Use the A word. Call it what it is. And help people understand that self-fulfilling prophecy when people have low expectations for students. There has to be discussions. There have to be conversations. People aren't going to change unless we engage in some conversations and have them have that aha light bulb moment. And it can be done. And it can be done by each of us. So I'm excited for the possibilities, the opportunities that every marginalized student in our school will start having once we dismantle ableism. So I will be back maybe in a couple of weeks. I might be in a due process hearing. We're going to see. But for sure by April 11th, we'll be back. I'm only doing like a couple live shows a month. But if you get our newsletter, and I'll put that up again. If you get our newsletter, then I'm always sending you information about when the next show is and sending you resources from this show. So thank you for being here live or on the replay. I am Charmaine Tanner. And as a special education advocate, as a parent, as a retired teacher, my passion is to make sure your child is seen as the wonderful, wonderful person that they are and the limitless opportunities that we're going to make sure are available to them. So keep on keeping on. And we will be back.